Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, live, and in real time. As always, this conversation is recorded and available at madisonbiz.com. Usually give us to a little bit later this afternoon. We'll have it up. And all of this is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie. And we'd like to thank our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly, and our small and emerging business sponsor, Easy Office Products. Coming up, we'll be joined by UW Athletic Director Chris McIntosh. But first, here are some chamber updates. As you can see behind me, the design on the wall, our mural that we're having done, is coming together. It's starting to take shape. We're excited about this work. We're using a partnership with a local street artist and muralist, Mike Leroy, to capture the essence of what Greater Madison is and what it means to our businesses. Mike started this process with us with a simple question, which: what is the color of Madison? What color is Madison? And I'd say ask yourself that same question. What do you think the color of Madison is? And then throw it in the chat. The chat is live today, so you can use it. And so if you have thoughts on what color Madison is, we encourage you to throw it in the chat. We'd love to see how your ideas align with our color palette that you see developing behind us. And who knows, if you come with a color that we hadn't thought of, you might just make it into the mural. If you haven't already, last time we talked about it, if you saw, it was much more of a blank wall behind me. And so we are showing you the evolution of this mural as it happens. But if you haven't looked at Mike Leroy's work, I'd encourage you to do that. Go to Mike Leroy, L-R-O-A, again, MIKELROA.com, and check out the amazing work that he's done around Madison and other places. And then obviously keep tuning in the Lunch Update in the coming weeks and months as we see the updates to Mike's artistic expression. In other news this week, President Biden signed into law the $280 million CHIPS and Science Act. And included in that $280 billion was a $10 billion investment over 5 years to create 20 geographically distributed regional technology hubs. Those hubs will focus on technology development, job creation, and expanding U.S. innovation capacity, but also maintaining our competitive edge internationally. And so when we think about the rising economic competitors, how do we stay competitive and not have all of that competitiveness reside in what are called the superstar cities? So mostly cities on the coast that we can all probably name off the top of our head that have largely driven innovation over the last 30 or so years. This hub program is a tremendous, humongous opportunity for both Greater Madison and for the entire state of Wisconsin. In 2019, the Brookings Institution put out a report that touted Madison as the prime candidate for tech hub growth outside of the coast, outside of those 5 superstar cities, and stressed the importance of developing cities like Madison in order to grow innovation, particularly in the heartland. The iconic headline that we think of was one of the senior fellows at Brookings saying the country just needs 10 more Madisons in order to catalyze the future of the innovation. We are excited about this opportunity. We believe we are well positioned. We've taken multiple delegations to DC over the last few years to lobby for this, and we're proud to say that it's now law. And we look forward to seeing the proposals that will come forward on how we catalyze and use this money to not only propel Madison, the state of Wisconsin, but our entire country forward, because it will lead to more prosperity and certainly strengthen our global innovation positioning. As far as upcoming events, just a few I want to highlight for you. We recently announced our finalist for Pressure Chamber, which is presented by Michael Best. Those companies are Benny, Fleet Cycle, Trace, Voximetry, and Yip Yogurt Chips. They're all very impressive companies, and they will deliver live pitches at the Majestic Theater on August 16th during Forward Fest. Pressure Chamber attendees, and we also have an all-star panel of out-of-state investors that will be joining us. They will all vote in order to decide which one of these 5 companies gets a reserve spot on the Chamber's trip out west to Silicon Valley to meet with investment firms in the fall. If you're a member, you can sign up for free. And if you're not, you can pay a small amount, or you could join the chamber and go for free. And go to madisonbiz.com/pressure chamber as a way to sign up for that. It sells out. It's a packed room. If you are curious about the future of Madison's entrepreneurial ecosystem and innovation coming out of the people that make Madison special, I'd encourage you to go. It is, especially since the pandemic started, where a lot of this kind of just got muted or lost. It is heartening. It really does renew your faith and your enthusiasm for what's going on in Madison's economy. And then the big news, the 69th annual dinner is coming on October 18th at Monona Terrace. This is our largest and most impactful program of the year. It will sell out. It has for a number of years. Just to prove that out, we have not opened registration yet. And we've already sold 737 of the 1,080 tickets available. And so we are approaching 75% of capacity already taken just because of the enthusiasm of sponsors and table purchases. If you would like to buy a table or hold a table, or you are interested in individual tickets, please reach out to any of us at the chamber. We would be more than willing to walk you through the process of reserving a seat or a table, and we look forward to seeing you there. And with that, that brings me to our guest, Chris McIntosh, who took over as the athletic director at Wisconsin in July of 2021, about a year into the job. He previously served as the deputy athletic director, where he oversaw the department's day-to-day operations under Barry Alvarez, and as Wisconsin's associate athletic director for business development. Chris has also served as the government affairs liaison, where he cooperated or collaborated with legislators. I assume you cooperated and collaborated with legislators on a wide ranging of issues, including name and image and likeness, capital projects, borrowing, treasury flexibilities, and this future legislation that may help or impact the department. In addition, he helped establish the Department of Clinical and Sport Psychology, which is committed to promoting student athlete growth through performance enhancement, psychoeducational outreach, counseling, and consultation. After being named the consensus All-American offensive tackle and with the captain of the Wisconsin's back-to-back Big Ten and Rose Bowl champions in '98 and '99, Chris played 3 seasons in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks, and then went on for a successful business career before returning to the UW. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Zach. Great to be here.
Let's just clear something up right from the start. Is it Chris or is it Mac? How do you want the business community to know you?
Well, my friends call me Mac. My colleagues call me Mac. I guess I'd like to be friends with the business community, so I'd like to be known as Mac. That's a pretty safe bet.
All right, so Mac from here on out. So, all right. Also, I mentioned the chat's live. So if you're in the live audience and not watching this on a recording, we'd love to hear your questions for Mac. And so if you have questions for him, put them in the chat below. And if we have time, we will certainly get to them. So Mac, you were named athletic director, and as I said, July of 2021. Quite a challenging time to take over the department. When you look back on that first year, what really stands out to you?
It's been an incredible year. I think, when I look back on, there's been what stands out to me is the rate of change that's taking place in college athletics right now. There's not even a close second place. But if I zoom out, I think about, the amount of change that's taken place in now the last 14 months, probably more so than the last easily 50 years, go all the way back to Title IX. I think about the approach that we took in a change of leadership, which, in conventional times, absent all that change, would have been a monumental disruption or transition for our organization. And I'm really proud of the way our organization made that transition, certainly doing so amidst everything that's happening right now, which I'm sure we'll dive into. But it's been a great year. National championships, and trophies hoisted, challenge, but also I think a fulfillment or delivering on our mission, which is, making a world-class education accessible to, some of the most talented young people that you can imagine. So, I participated in 2 graduation ceremonies at the end of each semester, and it's a front row seat to something that I don't think the general community gets to really see or appreciate. But the majors that you see listed attached to these kids that are just amazing in their sport. They're going to go out and do amazing things. And, that kind of ties back to the mission and what I'm passionate about to start with.
I think you could argue that few, if anyone, would have had more preparation for the job. I mean, just the perspective on the role, your past professional roles within the athletics department, outside of the athletics department, being a former student athlete here. So you knew a lot about the role, but was there anything that surprised you that when you got into the big seat that you said, I just never could have expected that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, obviously, I've got had a level of familiarity with Wisconsin, and I was kind of born from it myself, and but that in and of itself, it's not enough. Obviously the organization has done well over many years due to the leadership of people like Barry and Pat and Donna Shalala and many others along the way. I view myself as a guardian of the organization. I'm advancing it. I want to leave it better than how I found it. But we are on, it's not lost on me, and I'm really grateful for the fact that I've taken leadership of an organization that's on really solid footing, and in a number of different ways. Clearly our history of competitive excellence, of academic excellence, but I think what's often overlooked is just this knowledge of who we are, how we operate, what's important to us, what we value. And as I look around at some of my colleagues at other places, there are turnarounds that are taking place, and there's soul searching at a time when there's so much uncertainty for them to try to determine who they are. And so that did give me a head start. I believe in who we are and what we value. It would have been impossible to have gauged how much change and how fast we've faced. And so, that part, I don't know that there's anything that could have been done to have prepared for that. And we've spent day in and day out trying to evolve our organization to not just adapt, but to try to capture opportunity that'll present itself. And there's no way that I could have anticipated what's taken place over the last year.
So a part of your role is you love all sports equally, right? You've got if sports are children, you've got a lot of children. The one though that is most familiar to you, the one you played, the one that you were born from, as you put it, is coming up, and I think we're all excited to see the new look at Camp Randall, the changes that have been made. What can you tell us about the project and beyond just the sort of nuts and bolts of the project? How does that translate into a game day experience?
Yeah, well, I would tell you, the South End Zone project is about to come alive. Actually, we've got a bit of a dress rehearsal tonight, ironically or coincidentally. So we'll see, try to work out some kinks and get ready for Labor Day weekend and the opener of the season. This particular project, the catalyst or the genesis for this project was feedback from our fans. And going back to 2016, we began to ask our fans, our ticket holders, what kind of experience they would like to see in Camp Randall or expect to see in the future. And, over really years of that process, that led us to the design of the project that's going to come to life now. And really at the heart of it is an open air environment where you can receive a higher level of hospitality, maybe a more comfortable seat, but do that while experiencing the energy of Camp Randall, the atmosphere of Camp Randall. You feel more part of it. And, I'm happy to report the tickets are virtually sold out, almost like 99% sold out, kind of onesie, twosie left. And so the project has been well received, even during COVID when we went on sale. And I think, for that, I'm extremely grateful. Not only did our fans provide us the feedback and tell us what they wanted, but they came through on it and they delivered on that and helped us make this a financially viable opportunity for us. You mentioned with 23 varsity programs, and they all are special, and they all deliver on the same mission to our student athletes. But there's a certain reality, and I think a light was shined on that during COVID when we weren't able to fill Camp Randall, and to an important but lesser degree, the Kohl Center, and that is, the economic or the financial differentiator for Wisconsin versus others is filling Camp Randall, and it's filling the Kohl Center. And so, the South End Zone plays a role in offering a compelling opportunity for fans to come in and experience what they've asked for. But I think it's reflective of, a changing consumer behavior, consumer demand. And, and it's exciting to be part of what is now the next chapter of Camp Randall, a venue that's over 100 years old. And again, like I mentioned earlier, just kind of the guardian of it right now during this time. And it'll be thrilling to open the doors here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So the Big Ten made a major announcement recently with the addition of UCLA and USC. I think the pros of bringing those two major schools into the conference and cementing the Big Ten as a coast-to-coast league is pretty clear. I don't know that we have to spend a lot of time talking about why the decision got made, but I'm curious about the challenges of it. I mean, it seems that it will have some. What was your reaction to the news? I mean, just that initial, when you first found out, how did you react to it?
Well, I was filled with excitement. Obviously, this positions the Big Ten and in turn Wisconsin it puts us in a great position. The addition of two fantastic institutions, both academically and athletically, it's hard to beat those. But it's also reflective of just the times that we're in, the uncertainty, the change and transformation that we're going through. It does bring challenges along with it, mostly logistical or operational. I think that those can be worked through, and we continue to focus on those now. But at the same time, it's not lost on me what the migration of those two schools to the Big Ten means for others, especially our friends in the Pac-12. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge or admit, there's part of me that at least had to recognize that, and it didn't come without an understanding of what it meant there as well.
Yeah. How about you mentioned it, but I'm curious on sort of the direct impact for student athletes. It's when obviously they're used to traveling to the East Coast with the last edition. But now with a bi-coastal, what does that look like for the student athlete and the impact of travel while they're still in school?
Yeah, I think we're in the early stages of addressing that, or coming up with a strategy to deal with that. I think it likely means for our student athletes, especially in this era of a higher degree of unpredictability in commercial air travel, I think it likely means more chartered air travel for us. I think it's going to force us as members of the Big Ten to think about scheduling in a different way, maybe scheduling of multiple events and multiple sports and trying to cluster those a little bit. These are things that are just now, we begin to talk about them. We've got 2 years to figure that out. But it is a challenge that we need to address. I'm confident that it can be done. I'm fortunate. I feel fortunate, given our kind of geographic location, kind of central now to the school, all schools in the Big Ten. That's convenient for us. But I think the short or the takeaway is, I'm not sure that the mode that we've used for travel historically will get us to where we need to be in the future. And so we're in the midst of kind of analyzing that and come up with a plan.
So this realignment within the Big Ten follows Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. I'm curious where you see the next few years going in terms of conference realignment. I mean, are we headed to an outcome where it's the Big 20 versus the Southwest Southeast conference? Like, is Is it just two conferences standing in the end?
Well, I'll stop short of making predictions, but what I will say is there are some enormous governance questions that need to be answered, and that's where a lot of the debate is right now, and candidly, that's where a lot of the uncertainty is right now. The NC2A underwent a process of redrafting its own constitution. It's going through a transformation process right now. Some of the preliminary modifications were just released in the last 10 days or so. There's a lot of work to be done there. Big Ten's got representation on that committee, and that committee, as far as it relates to Wisconsin, focused on Division I. And so I think what you saw is a little bit of a departure from all divisions with all-encompassing policy, and kind of a recognition that the times dictate that they're treated a little differently. And I think you might see that even within Division I, more so than you already do. But those are the kind of questions that are at the forefront. And I think everybody's awaiting to hear recommendations put forth by the Transformation Committee, and I think it's really the next step, or the taking off point for the next kind of phase of discussion or debate.
So you were first hired into UW as a business development. It was a business development role. I forget the actual title, but you had a business development role in 2014. Certainly, you've had experience inside and outside of the department, understanding financial challenges and what it means to run a major collegiate program like Wisconsin's. So we know, as you talked about at the top of the show, there were the pandemic issues that you had to deal with. But also you've come in with new rules around image and likeness and name, or name, image, and likeness, so we can follow the acronym, have all come into effect. I guess in order to start this conversation, one, so those who are in the audience who might be unfamiliar with NIL, can you just explain what changes have been made and how that's impacting the collegiate landscape?
Yeah, I think to understand one of the central themes here, you have to go back to June of 21, when the Supreme Court ruled on the Alston case and determined the NC2A did not have the authority to place limits on what was in that case considered academic award, or limits on academic expenses. It seems pretty narrow, but if you read the concurrence around that, written by Judge Kavanaugh, he expands on that and basically questions the NC2A's authority to limit just about anything. And that decision was released about a week and a half prior to July 1 of last year, which is when the NC2A was faced with a challenge, and that is the state of California put forth legislation that became effective on July 1 that made NIL, name, image, and likeness, legal. The NC2A basically read the tea leaves. They don't have to be read as tea leaves, but basically got the message and pushed down policy making on NIL to either the state level, that if you were part of a state that has state law on NIL, which we are not, you have to follow state law, or each institution for themselves. And so on about 10 days or so notice, we learned that we needed to create our own policy on this. NIL, for those that haven't followed it, allows our student athletes to monetize their name, image, or likeness for their own personal benefit. And we took, which by the way, I'm 100% supportive of, and I can see, in my perspective as a former student athlete, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that for a long time, for decades, there was a lot of weariness or skepticism about what this would mean. Largely, NIL, in the way that it was intended to be, has worked very well. Our student athletes have benefited here at Wisconsin in a number of ways. People are familiar with seeing Johnny Davis's face on a billboard, but also, it's allowed some of our student athletes to start their own businesses. Danielle Hart in volleyball, for instance, is an artist. This allowed her to create her own or go live with her own business and produce and sell her own art. It's spectacular. It's allowed athletes like Chris Vogt in basketball to create a fundraising campaign in his name to benefit his hometown in Kentucky that was devastated by tornadoes, and which it seems crazy to think today that just a short time ago that wouldn't have been permissible. So I think our student athletes have benefited from it greatly. The concern is, and this is what I worry a lot about, we spend a lot of time, there's a lot of hand wringing taking place right now about how NIL is being used inappropriately for recruitment of student athletes, for payment to student athletes. It's kind of quid pro quo, as inducement for transfers. And I think right now that's where the NC2A has its hands full and is trying to grapple with that.
What's been the approach at UW? I mean, how have you guys? You said you had to come with your own policy. How have you balanced it and stayed on the ethical line, on the ethical side of the line when it comes to NIL?
Yeah, I think our policy is pretty generous, and I think it's been well received. The feedback that I've gotten from our student athletes would indicate so. We've been pretty generous in that. We encourage them to participate if they would like. We've incorporated it as part of our career and leadership programming. So we've turned it into an educational opportunity, brand development, general business practices, accounting, just general advice. We're staffing up now. It's resulted in a bit of a restructure within our organization. We've struck partnerships with organizations like Open Doors, which is a platform, Altius as a consultant. And so that's gone really well in the community. You may have seen the Varsity Collective stand up kind of alongside of. It's an entity that's not connected with the athletic department or the institution, but it is one that's being led by badgers that have the best interests of our student athletes at heart, and they're trying to create NIL opportunities and at the same time provide services that are complementary to what we can provide. While we can provide general business advice, general accounting or tax advice, what we are forbidden to provide is specific business advice, specific accounting advice. And we've partnered with areas on campus, the Law and Entrepreneurship Program, one example where our student athletes can go and get advice. And I think the Varsity Collective is an example of kind of the evolution of NIL in Madison that's going to kind of round out the offering that our student athletes can participate in.
Let's pull out a little bit, sort of pull away from campus for a second, and from the department. You've served on several search committees for top coaching positions, and you know the work that goes into recruiting athletes to the university. So how important is the place? How important is Madison, the culture in that recruitment pitch?
It's essential. I think our approach is a holistic one. At Madison, this is come as no surprise to you. It's one of the best kept secrets, and we don't want it to be a secret. And I think once, if you think about the draw or the pull, the reach we have from areas around the country, around the globe, really, it's only once they get here that they can fully appreciate just how beautiful it is, the total experience around campus, the social aspect of it, obviously the competitive aspect or excellence, the standard we have is appealing to those that are competing at that level, and the academic. This is a place that a young person can compete for championship level competition, world-class education, and a lifestyle or a social experience that rivals any. And so it's the total package. I think what we're trying to do is demonstrate to those that we're trying to recruit the long-term benefits from that opportunity, from that experience. It's more than a 4-year experience or a 5-year experience. It's got a 40-year benefit. This is a 40-year decision that they're making. And, we've tried to create some programming and some policy to try to mirror that.
Is it ever a liability? I mean, there are times where, I always, we talk about this here. We're obviously always selling Madison, whether it's to investors, companies, to talent. Knowing our blind spots and being honest about what we have to overcome helps us in our work. But I'm curious, is Madison a liability at times?
There's 2 areas that come to mind that I think we tried to confront. One, you can't do anything but the weather, and so there's actually been some flexibility that has been granted recently that allows us to bring recruits here in June and July versus December, January. And so that's actually been really helpful. It's a simple change, but that being made available is huge for us. The second, though, is one that I think we're all tackling, and that's diversity and inclusion, or diversity in general on one aspect, the city of Madison or the community itself, 2, the university setting, and then 3, the athletic department. And, we've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort over the last years, but certainly over the last 13, 14 months since I've taken this leadership, to try to do something about that, to connect with the community, to create connection that will allow not just our student athletes, but our staff that we recruit from other parts of the country that aren't familiar with Madison, who come from diverse communities or backgrounds, to be able to connect. And I've really been, it's been exciting. Some of the partnership that we've developed over the last year, new relationship with community leaders that are eager and excited to help us with that. And so there's been a lot of progress made over the last year. There's a lot of work to be done on that. This is a commitment to a journey. There's no finish line on this, but I think, those are the 2 areas that come to mind. One, we can't do anything about the weather. The other, we can do a lot about.
Right. Well, the first one, we can help you with how we sell it. You can't change the weather, but we can change the perception of the weather. Second one, I'm glad you named it. I'm glad you named the DEI. Dave Chappelle, I won't repeat the joke because I can't on live broadcast, but Dave Chappelle last time I was in town made an observational comedy joke about being Black in Madison and the football team. And we know that athletics is one of the most diverse places in this community. Right? If you want to see diversity, go to the athletic teams. You'll see it. But I'm curious, as you talk about how you're focusing on it. I know that there's an inclusion and engagement department, and I think it was one of the first in the country that was created. But I'm curious about the work and what does success look like in that? And so maybe let's just start, once you recruit an athlete to Madison, how does the department ensure that Madison and the campus and the department and the team are welcoming and inclusive? I guess the bottom line is, how do you create a sense of belonging for these student athletes once they get to Madison?
Yeah, well, a couple of ways I could come at that. So I think, let me kind of zoom out for a second. So here's the approach that we're taking. We're following the teachings of Howard Thurman. Okay, Howard Thurman, as an advisor to Dr. King, believed in the search for common ground between 2 individuals, that coming about based upon or because of shared experience and self-exploration. This is the underlying philosophy or approach that we're taking to the athletic department. And I think in the next week or so, we'll be able to make an exciting announcement around that. Be premature to do so today. But if you think about just that construct, when a student athlete comes to Madison and meets or joins their team, that part of it, I don't want to say that part of it is easy. That's a difficult transition for a young person to make, but common ground, and we got to step up there, and that we're all here for the same reason. We got something to unite around. That builds trust, that builds relationship, and then that allows, when inevitably there are difficult conversations or difficult events that emerge or a challenge, you've got a foundation from which you can talk through and understand and gain the perspective of the person that you're sitting across from. I think, sport, certainly sport at this level, that's one of the most beautiful things about it. And in a locker room, if I think back to the locker rooms that I've been part of, really opened my eyes and broadened my horizon, exposed me to people from all different walks of life, geographic, socioeconomic, racial, and so on. It's a beautiful part of sport. How do we take that, which is kind of central to what we have, and expand it to our department beyond each sport, 23 sports, pull them together? How do we expand that across campus and open our doors up and invite campus in, and then to the community? And so, but that what I'm describing is the kind of the driving force behind our strategy or our approach. There's a lot of work to do, but I think we're making progress. Like I said, I'm excited about some upcoming announcements that we can make, and but a lot of work to do nonetheless.
We'll stay tuned for those announcements. I want to just, before we move on from that, I want to just talk about inclusion from a different angle too, which is Title IX. So you brought at the top of the show, you brought up the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And you can't help but be, in the venues, read the headlines, get a sense in this community that some of our women's sports, hockey, volleyball, they're top tier powerhouses. Like, we have grown to expect, them to be contenders for national championships. What do you think the future holds for Title IX in general, but non-men's sports on campus specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I think there are two things that aren't being talked about enough. One, not to sidetrack, education as the core mission of college athletics. All these other topics overshadow it. And two, what you're getting at, Zach, is what we refer to as broad-based opportunity. We have 23 varsity sport programs. We've got 800 plus kids. It just so happens a disproportionate amount of our revenues are generated from one or two sports, but it underwrites the expense of broad-based opportunity and access to higher education for everybody else. That's the model. And, and I've admitted this before, I didn't understand that. The 20-year-old me did not understand that model. And Deanna, my wife, actually rode here for a period of time. And so we would talk about it when we were in college. Later on, I realized the importance of it. And now, as a father of three, two of which are girls, both of which, one just went to college to play college athletics and the other just committed to go play, I realized the importance of this experience for all. And so we're advocating for, fighting for, really, in the debate about where revenues should go in the future of college athletics. We're advocating for the preservation of broad-based opportunity. And we're the only country in the world that approaches it this way, that tethers athletics to education. Sure, it comes with its challenges, but I think it's a beautiful thing. But that is at the forefront of what we're dealing with now. We fought hard and made some really difficult decisions during the financial challenges of COVID to preserve that. And some of our peers, even within the Big Ten, weren't as fortunate. But we made tough decisions and said goodbye to staff in order to preserve that. Mm-hmm. It's one of our priorities, and it's going to be a big part of the debate going forward.
Earlier, you talked about the guardian role that you play, but I also remember a quote that I read somewhere right after you were hired, that your goal was not to just sustain or maintain, that you wanted to keep building the program, building the departments, building the programs, building the department. And I think we talked about the new project at Camp Randall, but I'm curious what you think the horizon of the future looks like. And I have a very specific piece that I want to ask you about, is that we see Madison continuing to rise nationally as a mecca for young professionals. More millennials move here as a ratio of all movers than any other city. We are one of the youngest city, one of the youngest, most educated cities. On all of those rankings, we just continue to do very well, which also means that we are importing talent here that conceivably has no connection to Madison or the UW. What do you think that the horizon looks like for creating experiences within our athletic facilities or the game day settings that brings in people that aren't alumni, that aren't tethered, that aren't Badger Red, they don't bleed it. Think Deer District or Titletown. What is the opportunity for us to bring that experience into those that maybe aren't here from where they grew up or where they went to school?
Yeah, I think we want to strive to position our brand, Wisconsin Athletics, as a must-see part of Madison, a must-see part of the state of Wisconsin, really. And so to attract people, we were talking about this yesterday, actually, as part of our strat planning process that we're in the midst of right now. The 28-year-old that works at Epic, that's a graduate of Notre Dame, that person should be compelled to come to Camp Randall on Saturday to be part of it, because it's just part of the community. It's part of being connected to Madison. It's part of the happening. It's kind of part of the anthropology of this area. So, that is something that we're trying to do, expand our brand, expand our reach to new markets or demographics in a way that we haven't done in the past. I thought you were going to go a different direction. That is, at the same time, it's an emphasis of ours to retain the talent that we've recruited into the state as part of the student athlete experience, create connection with them within the community, hooks, if you will, and then provide meaningful career opportunities for them post-graduation. And so I think we're trying to come at it from both ends. I think if we do that, that's a tough sell when someone commits to go to college or play sport in college when they're 16, 17 years old. They're not thinking about living there for the rest of their life. That's just not part of the decision. But I think there's an opportunity over 4 or 5 years to create a sense of community here and then to keep that talent here, especially as we emphasize or focus on diverse talent here in the city.
Yeah. I appreciate talking about the other side of it too. We're starting to run low on time, so I'm going to try to jam 2 questions in really fast. One, I want you to put on your old helmet for a second. First question is, does it still fit?
It's much too large now.
But seriously, I wonder how the student athlete experience has changed from when you were a student. What's different today versus then?
It's night and day. When I was here, couldn't provide meals, didn't have an academic support center, career and leadership counseling, name, image, and likeness. It's completely and utterly different, totally different. When I think of the resources that we provide now and the opportunities provided now, it's what gets me the most excited. The mission, our goal is to change the lives, elevate the lives of these student athletes that come through our doors, position them in a way that they can accelerate, catapult themselves into the next chapter of their life, prepare them. So I think over time, and that's been built by leaders like Barry and before me. And, my job is to continue to amplify that, continue to optimize that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about, I just want to state it since I'm not going to have time to ask you a question about, I noticed that mindfulness is part of that change too, that you've got a 1 FTE that's just focused on, the work that Richie Davidson's doing on campus and that mindfulness. So I just want to acknowledge it and say, I think that's great. Final question in 30 seconds. What makes you hopeful?
I think, what makes me hopeful is when I spend time around our student athletes, it's easy if you just read the media and what's happening to get down on college athletics. It really is, to get frustrated. Where's this going? When I spend time around our student athletes, they fill me with hope and excitement. Some of the most talented young people you ever been around. So much potential. And do we strive to be better? Absolutely. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But I think our student athletes love being in Madison, at Wisconsin. I think they love the experience that they're getting, and it just fills my bucket every time I'm around them.
That's right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this great conversation. Certainly thank our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly, small and emerging business sponsor, Easy Office Products. And Mac, thank you for joining us. I know you had a busy schedule today, so we appreciate you taking some time to join us live. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And what makes me hopeful is having you at the helm. So Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Zach. It was
Take care.
fun.